My name is Dave Lawrence. Home to me is a place where I am comfortable with everyone, where I make room for everyone. Home is where I can learn.
Welcome everyone on behalf of Chapman Partnership. My name is Dan Gretsch, and I'll be hosting today's program. For the past 25 years, Chapman has worked to help its homeless residents become self-sufficient to build a positive future. It's their mission to end homelessness in South Florida, and that mission has never been more critical than now. Tonight's program is an examination on the meaning of home through the eyes of South Florida storytellers. We collected these stories through a public call for submissions. We asked people to tell us what home meant to them in the time of a pandemic. We received dozens of submissions, both sad and sweet, tragic and touching. We learned that home is so much more than a physical place. Here's what home means to some of our community contributors. A quick word of warning. The stories in today's program tackle adult themes that may not be appropriate for young children. Our first storyteller is David Lawrence. David has been a pillar of the Miami community for more than 3 decades, first as publisher of the Miami Herald, and now as a leading advocate for children. During his decade as publisher, the Miami Herald won 5 Pulitzer Prizes. As an advocate for children, David helped pass a statewide constitutional amendment to provide pre-K for all 4-year-olds in Florida. He led 2 successful campaigns to fund the Children's Trust, which provides a dedicated source of funding for children in Miami-Dade County. And he's chair of the Children's Movement of Florida. In 2018, David wrote an autobiography called A Dedicated Life. Here's Home is a Book by David Lawrence.
Home is the completeness that every child needs, that I needed, that my children need, my grandchildren need, everyone's child needs. Part of the definition of home for me is about stability, having a place to go to, having a place where people love me and care about me and want me to succeed, think I can succeed, ultimately know I can succeed, are willing to put together whatever is necessary. And that isn't simply giving people things, it's helping people to understand that they need to earn things. Every child needs to be talked with, sung with, held, hugged. All of that is home. I was remarkably fortunate, blessed in the home in which I grew up. We didn't have a fancy life. I'm the second oldest of 9 children. I grew up in a farm in way upstate New York in real snow country. My father was, at that period in life, a farmer. My mother did not work outside the home, but she sure worked. I grew up at a home where we all had dinner together, and my father would quiz us on government and politics. I grew up in a home where almost all of our presents were books. I give a lot of books to children who are just born because I want them to have the first book with a written message from me that says, this will get you started on the joy of lifelong reading. I want them to know that at age 78, I'm still reading books, usually at 2 or so a week. I want them to be not only go to kindergarten and pre-K and first and second and third grade, and not only college. I want them to be lifelong learners, and I want them to build families and have homes where everyone is loved, everyone is cared for. One of the fundamental thoughts that I have in my own life is the importance of having high expectations of other human beings. The possessions that were most prized in our home, those possessions were books. And the joy of getting a book and then that afternoon having a chance to read it was special. The present I most like to give to people at any age is books. Miami does a pretty impressive job on the subject of homelessness. Frankly, it's a national model. I knew Albert Chapman, knew him well, spoke at his funeral, thinking he was one of God's most special people. So I think we're doing so much here. But I don't think we ultimately get to where we want to unless we get there for everyone. And that to me is the mission of the Chapman Partnership. And that to me is about every child having a home, a real home.
I now want you to meet one of the children in our community that David has been advocating for. Her name is Nia Nelson. Nia was homeless for long stretches of her childhood, and she was a resident at the shelter run by the Chapman Partnership. Here's Home is Protection by Nia Nelson.
When my mother and my younger siblings and we slept at the Metro Rail station a few times, a few nights, and I recall when we slept at the Metro Rail station, it was very difficult and it was worrisome. It was very scary. My mom and my siblings and we slept there, and really, we really didn't sleep, and it was very uncomfortable. And I remember my mom, she stayed up the whole night, and she held over us, and we tried to get some sleep. And I just remember her just watching our surroundings, making sure not anything happened to us, anybody can do us harm or try to take us, or, people might call the police and try, they see a family and try to take the kids from the mother, and when she's just trying to do her best with the situation that she was given. I have 4 younger siblings, 3 sisters and 1 brother. And yeah, like I said, my mom just, on those nights, she just had to make sure we were, safe and in harm's way, even though we were out on the streets. And, she made sure we slept under the cameras just in case, anything could happen. The cameras were there to watch, even if something did happen, God forbid. Now I am a student at FIU under the Fostering Panther Pride. I'm on a 4-year ride, scholarship. And I'm studying, I plan to major in nursing. I want to be a nurse because I genuinely like taking care of people. When I shadowed nurses, I saw the great things they did, just being hands-on with a patient and caring for them. I want to be able to give back, and just, that's what I see nursing as. Home is where my family is. As long as we're together, I feel at home.
Nia now attends FIU on a full scholarship. She's studying to be a nurse. I actually have my own home story that I want to share. It's called Home is More Than I Bargained For. In the summer of 2005, I was a reporter for NPR covering the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf Coast. That summer, I met an amazing woman from New York on an airplane, and we fell in love. Her name is Gretchen. A few months later, I covered another hurricane, this one bearing down straight for my home, Miami. It was Hurricane Wilma. Wilma tore through downtown Miami. While I was covering the storm from the radio station, a gust of wind shot an industrial-sized air conditioning unit into the roof of my Miami Beach apartment. I arrived home to a stormwater-soaked apartment. I could see the sky through the hole in my bedroom ceiling. A week later, my apartment was condemned. I had to find somewhere else to stay. Little did I know that I wouldn't sleep in my own bed for another 18 months. During that year and a half, I crashed on friends' couches and in their spare bedrooms. I kept my clothes in a suitcase in the trunk of my car. In my wallet, I kept a list of names, and at the end of the workday, I would text people on the list asking if I could crash with them that night. I know I was lucky to have friends with couches and spare bedrooms, but slowly I wore away my friendships. Sometimes I would text my whole list and no one would respond. On those nights, I pulled out a sleeping bag I had hidden in my office and I slept on the floor. I had no idea what went into owning or repairing a home. I didn't have insurance, so I had to pay out of pocket for the repairs. I found my first contractor in the parking lot at Home Depot, and he conned me out of $10,000. I ran out of money and had to get an emergency loan from the government. When I tried to do my own teardown, I put a nail through my thumb and had to go to the ER. I gorged on 79-cent bean burritos from the Taco Bell on Biscayne and 36th and gained 30 pounds. I was a white guy with an Ivy League education and every advantage that being upper middle class brings, and yet one hurricane took me down. I was depressed and defeated, swollen and scuffed. By day, I was this hotshot reporter at NPR. At night, I slept under my desk. I felt constantly ashamed. Besides my job, I had one other thing going for me. Every night, I spoke by phone with Gretchen, the woman from New York that I met on the plane. I wouldn't have made it through without those daily conversations. A year after we met, I asked Gretchen to move from New York to Miami. She said yes, and then asked where we were going to live. Oh yeah, that. I now had a hard deadline, 6 months to rebuild. Stormwater had streamed through my apartment. I had to rip everything out, the kitchen cabinets, the wallboards, the electrical outlets, even the joists in the subfloor. All that remained was this one dresser that I'd had since college. It was covered in the chalky residue of dried silt, but had mostly kept its shape. It became my mission to salvage the dresser. I spent hours sanding every inch, inside and out, thoroughly, lovingly. I primed and painted it to match its former color. It wasn't exactly the dresser it had once been. It was swollen and scuffed, but it had survived. The day I moved back into the apartment, I pulled my clothes out of the suitcase I'd been living out of for the past year and a half and put them in the newly refinished drawers. I left half of the drawers empty. Gretchen would be arriving the next day, and those drawers were for her, my future wife. Our next storyteller is Maxine Pupko. Maxine is a nurse, health advocate, and grandmother. Maxine tells a story that is far too common right now among seniors. It's about feeling isolated and afraid during the pandemic. Here's Home is Isolation by Maxine Pupko.
Okay. I've been alone in my apartment for the last 6 months with my 17-year-old dog, who is nearing the end of his little black and white life. I am 71. Besides my age, I'm high risk for coronavirus because I had cancer. I exercise, take classes on Zoom, eat healthy, and meditate. I do everything recommended to stay safe. I get an A+ for compliance, but unfortunately, I'm getting an F for peace of mind. Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe. I don't have coronavirus. My doctor said the shortness of breath is due to anxiety. This feeling of being alone and isolated is hauntingly familiar to me. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. People with PTSD can have disturbing thoughts and feelings related to a trauma from the past. These symptoms can be triggered by current events. I'm often unaware that my feelings are drifting backwards in time. In my senior year of high school, while eating breakfast one day, my mother looked at me and said, "Maxine, what's that on your neck? There's a bulge sticking out." I said, "Oh, that's my lump." I was used to my lump. I rolled it under my fingers during school. I thought of it as part of my body, like an Adam's apple. My mother took me to the doctor and immediately was sent to a head and neck surgeon. He told me that I would need surgery. I was a teenager. I thought it would be a minor procedure. No one even mentioned the word cancer. I entered the hospital on a sunny day in June, expecting to come home at the end of the day. Instead, I woke up groggy with a large oxygen mask on my face. I felt excruciating pain in my neck. It felt like a brick pressing down. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't lift my head. I was totally alone. I remember calling out, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." The oxygen mask was all foggy and I couldn't see. I called for my mother, "Mommy, Mommy." No one heard me. No one came to help. My mother was home taking care of my 3 siblings. My father was a traveling salesman and was out of town. I thought I was gonna die. I stayed in the hospital for a few weeks. I had numerous nuclear medicine scans and was put under giant science fiction-like machines. My head was held down with large, strong pieces of heavy-duty tape, and my legs were tied down so that I would just stay still. I was not a compliant patient. I was a terrified teenager who felt isolated and alone. I had radiation treatments that involved swallowing a radioactive isotope. I had to be completely quarantined alone for weeks. There was a sign on my hospital room door that said, "Radioactive, do not enter." Food was dropped at my doorway. I cried a lot. The physical pain and the loneliness were excruciating. The world was 2 months into the coronavirus quarantine when I saw George Floyd being murdered by a policeman on my television screen. A policeman's knee crushed the neck of a man pinned to the ground. The man on the ground kept shouting that he couldn't breathe. Over and over he cried out, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." He called out for his mother. No one did anything. No one came to his rescue. I wanted to jump through the TV screen and push the policeman away. I had difficulty getting air into my own lungs. I heard myself screaming loud guttural sounds coming out of me. "Stop!" I began to cry. I was alone, weeping and sobbing so loud that even my feeble sleeping dog woke up frightened and stared at me with his old blind eyes. I know that the surgery I went through and the isolation that I had to endure were all life-saving measures. I know that a team of trained medical professional people saved my life. I know that no one was trying to kill me. I know that there's no comparison to a man brutally murdered with a knee on his neck. I know this, but post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't make sense. The mind identifies with the feelings rather than the actual reality of the circumstances. I know I'm safe inside my apartment, but I relive the horror of watching George Floyd's murder. It's been 4 months since George Floyd's breath was brutally robbed from him. Some people have started to go out, but I'm still in my own lockdown. The walls of my little apartment are closing in on me. I'm scared. Some days I feel like I just can't breathe.
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a terrible toll on the homeless community. Studies have shown that homeless individuals are twice as likely to be hospitalized and up to 3 times more likely to die than the general population. And rising unemployment and evictions are predicted to increase the homeless population by up to 45%. Our next storyteller is Marvin Jenkins. Marvin is a poet who works full-time at Boeing as his side hustle. Marvin has a love story he wants to share. It's about his personal struggle with homelessness and his hope for his future. Here's Home is Love by Marvin Jenkins.
When I was 13, I had a dream. I was asleep in my childhood bedroom in Richmond Heights. It begins with me and a girl in front of the movie theater at the Falls. I hear a melodious, powerful voice. I think it's the voice of God, but I don't know. I don't know what God sounds like. But for sure, it's a heavenly voice. This voice says, "This girl is the one. She will be your wife." A few years later, I met Serena. On our third date, we went to a movie at the Falls. Outside the theater, like a lightning bolt, it struck me. I dreamed this, exactly like this. Serena was the girl in my dream, the girl of my dreams. Serena was my first girlfriend. I've loved her since I was 15. I'm 37 now, and I'm still in love with her. From the beginning, I wanted to marry her, start a family, and grow old with her. That was a scary feeling at 15. I wrote her poems like, "My soul bleeds through my pen. We were both living with half a heart, but upon meeting, became whole." Our first year together was beautiful. Every night, we talked on the phone from our childhood bedrooms. We talked till 5 in the morning, but shortly after telling me she loved me, she broke up with me. She said, "I'm not ready for the strength of love you give me." I couldn't stop crying. My sister was so mad, she called Serena. "What the hell did you say to make my brother cry?" I lost my innocence. I lost my virginity to this girl. Yes, but I lost so much more when she broke my heart. After that, I started womanizing. I emulated guys from the neighborhood who were players. I talked to 2, sometimes 3 or more girls at a time. Yet, this was not me. I was playing a role to mask the pain I felt. I tried to get back with Serena from time to time. I would send her poems. "You are the only woman I will ever love. You are grace and mercy in angelic form, sent from above." But she always said she just wanted to be friends. One day, 3 years after our breakup, she invited me over and we got back together. I'd been waiting for this for 3 years. It was as if I were dying of thirst and she was my water. This time, my dance with an angel lasted 8 years. We got our own house together, a duplex in Richmond Heights. It had its ups and downs. What relationship doesn't? But I thought it would last forever. I loved her more than anything, except drugs. I started with marijuana, then ecstasy and coke. We did drugs together, but I was the one who was out of control. We conceived a child during one of our ecstasy sessions, barricaded in our room until 4 a.m. Yes, my daughter is an ecstasy baby. I'm not proud of how she was made, but she is my world. Her name is Gianna, which means God's grace. I supported Serena and my daughter for 2 years, so Serena didn't have to work. Well, the stress was making me lose my temper, which was already bad. I never placed a hand on Serena, but I was verbally abusive. We couldn't have a discussion about our daughter without me yelling things like, "I know what's best. I'm her father." After 8 years and a really bad fight, she broke up with me. I lost my home, Serena, and essentially my daughter. Serena and I had a longtime mutual friend named Jennifer. She took pity on me and let me rent out a room in her house. Everything was cool at first. I paid rent, went to work. But on my days off, I didn't care about anything except getting high and trying to suppress the pain of being without Serena and Gianna. I would cop ecstasy, cocaine, and weed. After paying rent and my phone bill, I would give Serena $400 for Gianna and their rent, which left me with $800 a month to blow. And I did. One night, I was extremely toasted. My drug-addled brain thought it would be a good idea to text Jennifer. The text started out like one of my poems. How does one friend tell another words that are supposed to be reserved for a lover? Then the ecstasy took hold. My text messages got more and more sexually graphic. Jennifer did not text me back. Those texts ruined my life. Jennifer kicked me out of her house. I slept in the playground that night. I could see my old bedroom window from where I slept. And of course, Jennifer told Serena. After that, I admitted myself into rehab. I got out and Serena let me come home. 6 years later, I got hooked again on drugs and lost everything again. I was back in a homeless shelter, mentally and emotionally broken. I'm out now. I have a good job at Boeing. I have my own apartment, and I'm working on a new poem for Serena.
The home stories we've heard this hour touch on mental illness, violence, isolation, displacement, and drugs, as well as love, community, and sanctuary. Homelessness at its emotional core means feeling a profound insecurity. And at its very essence, home means feeling safe. To learn more about how Chapman Partnership is working to eradicate homelessness in our community, visit chapmanpartnership.org. For Chapman Partnership, I'm Dan Gretsch.